We're going to start straight off with a few words from the artist Prabhakar Pachpute. Prabhakar.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Prabhakar Pachpute, and I'm an artist who has done an exhibition in the corridor. I'm here to say a few words about where we are.
Prabhakar, do you want to come in here?
Thank you. Thanks, John.
So we are in the space at the moment where I have designed a kind of a space where we all getting together or gathering. It's about a gathering, and the way it says that the art writing constructing the contemporary city, and also talk about the cage and the political animal. So these exhibitions came with the idea of the fables from Johnny Roger, and I responded with my visual ideas. So it came with the form of book. So we just did, yesterday before we opened a book with the exhibition, and today we are here to gather and talk about the animals especially. And so this form that you see behind it came from my idea of the way I work, and from my memories, some childhood memories, and also from the Jungle Book. As everyone know that it is the place where all the animals used to gather together and to discuss for the possibilities or all the problems or the many things. So this is something that that I was imagining for the assembly of the animals. And also, as I said, from my childhood memories is we used to have a mud house in the village, and we used to have some corners in each walls, and my mother used to keep some small pockets inside those. As you see, there's black holes in these pockets. So that used to be the secret place to keep a secret or the precious things. So that reminds me something that my mother used to tell me, or my grandmother, that it is a place where we used to keep your stories. So this is a place where we all are right now, and I hope we can bring more and more different stories. And this is it. Thank you so much.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much, Prabhakar. Okay, so now I'm going to have to speak for 10 or 15 minutes in order that we get to hear the sounds, which are going to mean things like there are 5 minutes to go and you have to finish. So you're going to have to bear with me while I speak about that. Right, so some of you have been here yesterday. Well, not here, you've been at just come this morning. So there's going to be a bit of repetition for those of you who were here yesterday in terms of introducing the whole event. So we have this event, Political Animal. It's much more than an event. It's about performances, it's about works of art, it's an event, it's a conference if you like, there's talks, speeches and so forth, workshops, there was dance yesterday too, music later on today, so a lot of different things are coming together. Right from the very beginning, with the even with the very name, Political Animal, of course we're aware of this kind of oxymoronic content of the political animal, where you have this idea of some kind of, if you like, a very human aspect, the political, and then it's juxtaposed with the animal. So what we were interested in right from the start was exploring ways in which, in the current contemporary life, the behaviour of groups and societies is affected by non-rational, instinctual behaviour, that of not just in the crowd, but also, say, the mob, the pack, and so forth. So the idea right from the beginning was to have that, to juxtapose these two features, if you like. So yesterday, we held the first day in what we're calling the human space, which was a space designed by the Dutch artist Jonas Staal. And he designed that place yesterday as a kind of a gathering space for political discussion, if you like. And it was originally called the Scottish European Parliament. And so his idea was that in the wake of the Scottish referendum, independence referendum, and the Brexit referendum, that there should be some way of people coming together in a grassroots form and thinking through these issues, especially from the point of view of this country, Scotland, where we did, of course, or the majority of people did vote to stay within the European Union, and that seems to be not being taken account of, should we say. So the idea was of providing some kind of political forum where these issues could be discussed, all sorts of issues, not just Brexit and Scottish independence. There was a discussion, for example, in that exhibition about the Brazilian elections and all sorts of, about Syria and what's happening there, all sorts of things. So that's very much the human forum there, if you like. And it was designed like a parliament, if you like. And the idea of the Scottish European Parliament from Jonas was that it would be a utopian thing which would take place on a disused North Sea oil rig. So utopian in the sense that it's removed and isolated from everyday reality and juxtaposed, if you like, against the more bourgeois political traditions of power centres of Brussels and Strasbourg, for example, and it would, lead us to question these sort of centres of authority, if you like, to question the very notion of borders and limits of land and sea and so forth. So that was very much a human forum, and here we are today. As Prabhakar has just introduced it, in what we're calling the animal space. And as Prabhakar said, what was very interesting from us right from the start was to take the form of the fable. Of course, the fable seems to belong to a much simpler age. It's a form that has been used for moral and political purposes in all cultures across the globe. So from India, the Panchatantra, for example, from ancient Greece, the Aesop's fables from 17th century France, the De La Fontaine's versions of Aesop's fables and so forth. And of course, what we see there is the talking animal delivering some simple moral message to us. So what we were interested in doing was, again, using the image and the word. What is the relationship between the image and the word? Is that still the same in this age of alternative media, of social media and so forth, with this absolute barrage of words and images that we see now? Is that changing? And how can we investigate that by updating, if you like, or by taking the form of the fable and trying to not necessarily make it something modern, but trying to experiment with it and do something completely different with it to understand that relationship for us now between the word and the image. So that's what we've been trying to do with the fable, as Prabhakar was saying. And if you haven't already had a look at his exhibition out there, then it's absolutely wonderful and you should take a look at it. This new kind of relationship between the word and the image, exposed through the vehicle of the fable as a talking animal. Okay, so yes, so what we're interested in is the relationship between the individual and the collective, for example, and that's what we're going to talk about a lot about today. As I say, that kind of idea of the instinctual, the bestial even, What input does that have into our world? Now that the word seems to be, there's this proliferation of the word that seems to go somehow beyond just its lexical content. We're going to be investigating that, I think, with quite a few of the speakers here today. So what I should do, first of all, before we go any further, is just introduce the speakers. I'm not going to give any biogs. We're just going to introduce them by name and say who they are, and then later they're going to give you a talk, obviously. I'm waiting for this funny... How far away are we, Kenny, from the
6 minutes.
6 minutes to go, so that means in 1 minute we'll hear the first noise.
No, 6 minutes.
All right, okay, fine. Because what we have, just so some of you are wondering what the hell I'm doing, we have an automated response. You know how normally when people speak at a conference and somebody holds up a 5-minute sign saying you've got 5 minutes to go, what we have is a special, we have a special sort of timer, and we've got some animal noises that are coded to say this noise means 5 minutes and this noise means stop. So we're trying to... And a 2-minute noise too, right? Oh wow, I'm missing some of the animal noises. So we think that's rather coordinated with the whole nature and theme of political animal. Anyway, so I'm trying to run towards that. Speaking, I've got maybe about 5 minutes to go, so why don't we introduce some of our speakers? First of all, on my right, we have, and we've got to be very careful how we say their name. It's a very powerful name, and I hope none of you are offended by it. I'm sure you won't be. We have on my right the Dutch pair of artists, Fucking Good Art. I'm not speaking at them, I'm just citing their name. Fucking Good Art, that's it. The name of the magazine is Fucking Good Art. And of course, it's Nienke and Robert from Holland, from Netherlands. Oh, goodness gracious, I nearly got that wrong there. People will be saying I come from England next. Anyway, okay.
Hey, watch out.
yeah, watch out, okay. Okay, we'll come back to them in a minute. On my immediate left, we have Ravi Sundaram from Delhi. Okay, beyond that, we have Agnieszka, excuse me. Wait a wee minute. Agnieszka Killian, from Poland, but currently resident in Berlin. Beyond that, we have Mary Lafferty, Scottish artist from Edinburgh. So we're running out of things to say here before we get these funny noises coming on. So not quite sure where we should go with that. We should maybe just... how long have we got to go, Kenny?
4 minutes.
Oh, goodness gracious, goodness gracious. Yeah.
Can I read something?
I know we shouldn't have done that. Yes, Robert wants to read something. Yeah, okay. That was quite unfortunate, putting that on, having 20 minutes to speak. Anyway, oh.
But you speak fast. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I'm saying too much, aren't I? I'm saying too much already. You could speak, you see, but what would happen, actually, if you started to speak, Ravi, then the whole thing would go out of sync, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yes, it would.
Maybe we should have had this.
What? Oh, will they? Okay. All right. Well, so just to say, we will start then. We will start. Okay? I will just introduce Ravi and we'll restart the thing. There are some certain animal noises. The final animal noise when you must stop speaking says something like, "Kukuri-kukuri-goo." And I think that's been performed by Viviana, but you'll know that when you hear it. There are other animal noises before that. Okay. So we're going to start then. We're going to start with Ravi Sundaram from the Sarai Institute in Delhi. Ravi is going to speak about, obviously I don't want to tell you what the whole thing's about, but it's going to speak about crowds and crowd behaviour. And as I said, that's obviously something that's vital to this whole notion of the political animal. You know, what sort of behaviours are changing in this new media age? And Ravi is a media expert, of course. And so how is our behaviour, how is crowd behaviour, how is the collective behaviour affected by, controlled by, or permitted by new media to change and develop? And what has that meant? Is it all good? Is it all bad? Well, let's see. These are the sort of things that I think Ravi is going to speak about. Ravi, take it away. Ravi Sundaram.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Viviana. Thank you, Prabhakar. What I'm going to do, I'm the odd person out. I'm an academic. I'm not an artist. So these are just ideas. But I'm very interested in...
Can I just bring that over because it's for the recording? Thanks, Ravi.
I'm very interested in a problematic that everyone in this room has been witness to, which is the crisis of something designated in the European 20th century quite unproblematically as the collective, right? Now, what we have is, I would suggest, a new desire for the political, which is characteristic of our post-media world. And this is a kind of collective attachment which is neither oriented towards particular ends, nor is it valued for its transformative effects. So crucially, my interest here is the transformation of collectivity in a post-media landscape. Right? Remember, this is the heritage of the European project since 1789. And something seems to have changed in the last 5 years. New data-led infrastructures dominate our lives. Mobile gadgets increasingly, probably everyone in this room, connect us, creating new intensities and spurts. More than a century ago, European writers warned about the dangers of irrational street crowds. For writers like Gustave Le Bon and Gabriel Tarde, large crowds were prone to irrationality and hypnotic suggestion, emerging as the dark side of the enlightened bourgeois public sphere. For Tarde, the forces of imitation and contagion make crowds a particularly vital and unpredictable force. Later on, Weimar crowd theorists like Zimmel and Krakow situated crowds in the rhythm of capitalist modernity, expressive of a new sociality and industrial repetition. You know, Krakow's whole argument about the tiller girls. So the rise of fascism, if you see the 1930s, and you see this debate actually ventriloquized all over again, the rise of fascism was seen as the problem of the masses. For Arendt, the masses stood outside the normal code of political representation, emerging from disintegration and social passions. And if you read her, work on authoritarianism, this is very, very, very prominent. The mass stood as a field of negativity for the liberal order. And think about the debates you're having today. A body that could not represent itself. For Freud-influenced critical theorists like Adorno and Horkheimer, the crisis of the bourgeois family and exploitative sexual relationships bred docile subjects amenable to fascist propaganda. The leader, strong leader, offered channels for re-identification, right? And internalized this whole crisis of self-hatred of those below. Now, of course, after the war, it was argued that these energies had been tamed by the boom and mass television. Referencing crowd theory, and I'm really compressing 100 years here, referencing crowd theory, the media theorist Peter Sloterdijk suggested that the televisual principle had replaced the Führer principle. The hypnotic suggestion of the leader had been replaced by mass media, providing a venue for the discharge. So the discharge of the crowd is now transformed with television. Now, the rise of digital networks. The rise of digital networks has rekindled the debate on crowds or the new masses. A host of new popular books by academics make the connection between right-wing populist mobilizations and internet crowd formations. In a recent book, William Davies calls our condition nervous states, a constant blurring of emotion and political judgment, politics as a state of war, sensation rather than cool distance as a source of evidence. Now, we just have to go over the past 5 years. I don't have to explain too much here. Digital infrastructures today offer a perfect platform for the articulation of a new politics. Personalization, as we all know, is integral to the economy of experience in the web since 2005, transforming the way information is shared. In the current model, the Web 2.0 model, carefully curated experiences are drawn from user profiles, typically on platforms like Facebook. Social media algorithms silently gather activity when users go online, like all of us here, leading to personalized friendship suggestions, search predictions, of a surveillance regime of circulation. So this, very crucially, signals, think of the collective, very crucially signals a transformation of internet time. Circulation has taken command within a temporality of ceaseless transit, a culture of the indeterminate, which we are all complicit in. The clarity of closure is impossible, Life is a series of updates, the number of friends likes, the constant stream of information, lifestyle, the political opinion, individual popularity. Crowds, what happens to crowds and the whole collective? Crowds are traditionally understood as more ephemeral and less stable formation than communities or publics, right? They fluctuate with size, and the turnover of participants is very high. This is in Canetti's. If you see Canetti's book, this is how crowds fluctuate. With social media, like all of us tweeting here, this changes. With social media, such crowd-based dynamics are extended beyond physical co-presence. We know this. The rapid mediation of social media like Twitter makes it possible to be gripped by the energy of the crowd without being physically close to another body, right? Participation is not structured around deliberation between established positions or personalities, physically close to another body, right? Participation is structured by cascades of imitation. Like in Tard's classic formulation, the crowd today is structured by intensities. Think of all the mad Twitter updates, the series of WhatsApp when there's political crisis. It's completely transformed spatially. You're not there, but you're there. Right? In Twitter, for example, such intensities are conveyed by hashtags. The technical affordances also give such crowds a clear focus, but a temporary focus. In populist mobilizations, now I'm coming to the key punch. In populist mobilizations, the infrastructure multiplicity of social media allows the mobilization of different forms of intensities. It's a complete range of intensities that are mobilized. We can even argue that the fringe is a conceptually outdated word. Here, obscure groups, partial information, micro-celebrities, internet trolls, right-wing WhatsApp groups, all generate forms of value in events. Events are crucial here. Eventualization, to be political, is to produce events. Events mark new time, right? At the heart of this is a permanent state of incompletion, because it creates value. Eventualization, of course, constantly, and it exhausts us, interferes with the attempt to normalize. We are tuned in all the time and exhausted. Remember, in new media, the body is mobilized, the finger, the eye, the skin, right? We are constantly mobilized. We depend on touch all the time, whose screen is like a skin. So what does this do for politics, for the collective? It creates new conditions, new capacities for infrastructure, and it seeps, and I think quite fundamentally transforms the political. So I want to enter this debate, having summarized very crudely 100 years, I want to enter this debate with ongoing fieldwork in India. A lot of this comes from fieldwork. Focusing on the interface between mobile phone applications and multiple infrastructures. So I've been working on WhatsApp and hate speech in various sites. So central to my argument is the movement between different time, space, and infrastructure zones as media circulates and collective formations assemble and melt away. Remember, nothing is permanent. It's a permanent state of incompletion. The atmospherics of digital media culture seem to generate a kind of somatic collectivity, right? It's atmospheric, right? And they also rapidly fragment into other formations. Think of all the Brexit debate. Think of all the endless debates we've been having. This is a kind of somatic collectivity. To expand my argument, I'll be quickly moving through some of the trajectories. It's 20 minutes, so it's like a short pop-up. But remember, mobile media today has been cited as a player in censorship and surveillance, riots, sexual assault. So I'm looking at two sections very quickly. One is public affect and the post-colonial. And the final section, which I hope I'll have time, is about street crowds. That's the heart of my work. After the coming of. So very quickly, in India, 700 million people have phones. Pretty much everyone has a phone. It's completely transformed what we designate as the political. Very crucially, we know with the coming of the mobile phone, one crucial thing has changed, both in the UK and India. You had the separation of intimate and public life, which was the basis of really a lot of Western social theory, and the foundation of legal doctrine and case law. What has happened, and these are some of my sites show this, you have a complete transformation of this division, and everyone is in confusion. Courts, politicians, public life, because you just can't separate private and public life. In law, it creates all kinds of puzzles. A lot of evidence law is coming from internet chats, and you just can't produce this because the company's in California. It's impossible. In the old days, the police would show the evidence. Today, courts all over India, and I suspect here too, are in a real tizzy because evidence law is really going up and down. Now, if you, very quickly, what is the crisis here? Post-colonial governance for the last 40 years in India, and I suspect in different parts of the world, operated within a code that functionally separated the social and the media spheres. Welfare in the old days was the domain of politics and governance, while the institutions of media were managed by censors and regulators. So governmental power is a kind of performative power filtered between these two zones, people and things and public affect. So today, like here, like elsewhere, unregulated forms of media have circulated everywhere. In the old days, post-colonial populations were seen only as political actors. You had speech, you went and voted, that's it. Today, the circulation engine after the phone has changed this arrangement. You have an arrangement where political actors are also media proliferators. So you have really my apologies. I'm going back to PowerPoint after 12 years. So I work on a Mac, yeah. So what you have is really media objects move in and out of new infrastructures today, attach themselves to new platforms of political aesthetic action, and are drawn and depart from the time of media events. So what happens here are two kinds of movements. One is the personalization of politics, which we have seen, around the figure of a new leader, right? It's a figure of a new leader, and I want to show you this. Now, see this. So this is what is happening. So objects are going in, attach themselves, and move away. And this is very, very crucial. New political eventalization is crucial to this landscape, right? Now, let's take the leader. Now, all of you remember this image, Elie Liszewski, Lenin. It's a montage. The montage was very, very popular in the 1930s. It is there in fascist aesthetics, and Elie Liszewski did this. So when, in 2014, in the election campaign of Narendra Modi, think of the comparison, you know. So this is actually a very, very powerful campaign. So what they did, this entire thing is around a campaign called Selfie for Modi. They asked people to take a selfie of themselves and send it to the election campaign. So the montage of the leader, so it activating the body. It's really addressing this whole idea of new media, the body as a skin. It's activating the body and asking yourself to attach. So the energies of the crowd, which in the 1930s was Hitler or Mussolini, would be absorbed by the leader, are now taken in by a social media enabled crowd. What happens when this space changes? When this scenario is projected into a larger landscape, involving not one, but many protagonists. So, in 2015, thousands of young men in eastern India, in a town called Dimapur, broke into a prison and lynched a Muslim man accused of sexually assaulting a local woman. So you see this image, there are 10,000 people here, and they're lynching a Muslim man. I'm not showing that image. And as you can see, they're all holding their phones. Right? Now, this image recalls many previous moments familiar to this audience, Abu Ghraib, lynching photographs. But this is a crowd of 10,000 men, observers, photographers, and torturers, augmented by the infrastructure of the phone and immediately connected to many networks, because they couldn't shut this down for a long time. Images are moving around very, very fast, and this is fairly typical of what's going on. As many have shown, in new media, the experience of liveness produces a sense of taking us out of ordinary time. To participate is to touch the real through circulation. An image has no value if it doesn't move and attach itself to an environment. All of us picking up a phone image have to change it, have to share it. Has no value. Value is through movement. So this crowd is producing thousands of images. They seem indexical in a sense of being there. Their real value was in movement. In Software Takes Command, Lev Manovich argues that software is a meta-medium, synthesizing previously separate media, anticipating not yet invented media. So it's a two-way street. It's anticipating the future. Software is the cultural interface through which we negotiate the world. The provisionally ever-updating model of software makes it a candidate for the contemporary, and particularly the contemporary mode of temporality. Eventalization, constant events. New media is new because of the permanently extendable mode of software techniques. Life is a series of updates. Right. So, but remember, Manovich is privileging, the formal techniques. But if you see, in chat apps like WhatsApp, the space really transforms when you have events like this. So, now how do you deal with this? So, part of my ethnography was asking, what happens when events happen? What actually happens when violent events happen? So typically, the police try to shut it down. They try to shut it down. They try to shut down all circulation. So the classic candidate is shut down all internet in a district. Just shut down the internet. I'm not showing you those images because it'll take a long time. You issue an order, old colonial crowd law, section 144 of the Indian Penal Code, linked to crowds, just shut down everything in that particular district. Now you can't do it in a big city. It's not possible. Financial centers, not possible. But because the servers are in California, what are you going to do? Shutting down the internet. So people will bounce around. And remember, people are getting killed. It's a real problem for a local police person. It's a huge problem, right? Now, if you see this, I'm going to show you a little bit from my fieldwork. Now, this is one site. Something has happened. We're not sure what has happened. Now, typically, when something happens, I'm going to go over all the elements. Something happens, someone takes an image, some riot breaks down, some conflict breaks down. Immediately, within 5 seconds, someone is sharing an image. So you see a video, you see different WhatsApp chats, and you see a news report, right? So, something is going on. Something has happened. This is a particular event. Now, what does the police do here? Now, you have the first key movement the police do is of temporary capture and inhabiting the crowd. You don't stand outside the crowd, you inhabit the crowd, you populate the crowd. So the idea is to slow time. You slow down time. You make time slower. So here, the police are now part of all kinds of chat groups. This is, I would suspect every police department does this. So if there are a chat group of 200 people, you can bet in a neighborhood there's a police person there. Right? These are normal techniques New York police started. So the police are listening in to a kind of progressive chat group. This is in Bombay. This is something happening in Bombay. So she's a kind of a progressive group. So they've already posted on the group that something is going on. And here is a police person who's trying to slow time. Right? And then they're doing the usual technique, which is to slow the materiality of the internet to the materiality of paper. Which is the legal, you slow time, you shift it to a court case. And you try and intervene within the crowd. You can spread rumors. You can divert the energies of the. The essential key element here is to divert the energies of crowd formation, because as I said, crowd intensities have fundamentally transformed. They're not leader based anymore. They're not based on a centralized leader. So which Kanetti was the first to point. Okay. So to conclude, the last para. Wendy Chun writes, crisis is new media's critical deference. The very performativity of networks become visible in crisis. The volatile, addictive forwarding of media, the sense of inhabiting the time of an event. As group updates expand exponentially during crisis, they leak and attach into other environments, political events, and stuff like paper. The volatile mobility, I think, for us in this group, provoke, I think, familiar questions of social theory and the theory of the collective, the nature of this mobile sensorium and the techniques of navigating this treacherous world. So I think if the encounter between cinema and mass crowds resulted in so many pioneering ideas, I mean, Krakow and Benjamin are one, I think some of the best work is still to come. Thank you.
That's absolutely wonderful. Thanks very much. Yeah, we've only got 2 mics, so we're going to switch people around now. But yeah, I don't think we could have a better opening example of what I'm talking about in terms of the political animal with things that Ravi, in that wonderful talk, speaking about being gripped by the energy of the crowd, by intensities and unregulated forms of media. So that's what we start to think about when we're thinking about the political animal. And of course, so what we are here doing this morning is we've got the writing, publishing and alternative media panel. So we're having to switch around because we've only got 2 mics. So we're moving now to, as I said, fucking good art. I feel a wee oomph when you say that name. And Ninka's going to give us a presentation now. Now, so of course, when we say that this is part of this panel is to do with writing but publication, I'm thinking about the original sense of publication, which really means, to go public, to make something public. And of course, in the past, before the digital media, which, Ravi has exposed so comprehensively for us in its effect, before the age of digital media, publishing was something that was performed and carried out and controlled by a certain class of people who acted, if you like, as a sort of filter on what became available publicly. Okay, now, in the age of digital media, clearly that has changed, as Ravi has just been pointing out. It's not to say there is no filter, but there's clearly some different form of filter, whatever it is. But that doesn't mean that this is still that the new digital media is now the only route to publication. There is actually a long tradition of circumventing that class that controlled publication. A long anarchist tradition, I might point out, a DIY tradition. That goes back centuries. Particularly printers were often involved in that, for example, anarchist printers. And it carries on in some sort of anarchist DIY tradition. And it's still going. And in many ways, I think we could put fucking good art into that tradition. And that's, I would think, although they will probably tell you better, their field of expertise. And if you haven't been round the back of Prabhakar's wonderful wall there that encloses our auditorium in stone, if you haven't been round the back and had a look at the exhibition, the display laid out by Robert and Ninka about anarchist publications and the anarchist tradition, then I suggest you go and have a look at that. But in order to introduce you to the sort of things they are doing in that field, Ninka is going to speak now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
Ninka Terpse.
Thank you, Johnny, and thank you, Viviana, for inviting us, and everybody for organizing this whole thing. And Ravi, thank you for putting big shoes here to... It's scary to start speaking after such an elaborate talk of analysis. But then we are not going to analyze anything, so there's a different strand. I see that there's no notes in the
Maybe just click down?
No, but my
Just hit that and it goes down a slide.
no, but here
Oh, I see.
I had my text in here. Oh.
Here it comes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I noticed first in that political animal and FGA has in common is that we like to pile up titles somehow, juxtapose sentences and hope that something sparks from it. And as you see here, these are our latest few issues, and political animal, a writing cage, art writing, constructing the contemporary city. Next to that, I would put then revisiting what life could be, the ambivalence of success. It's a pile of titles, I would say, and it's playtime. And I've been talking a lot about that with somebody here yesterday, because I'm reminded of it all the time. Playtime is a book that uses fragments of Johan Huizinga's Homo Ludens as a start of conversations with a biologist, with an ethnographer who studies the bankers in the city of London, and a woman who runs a multidisciplinary office called Bureau des Temps. In France, 70 cities have a Bureau des Temps that look at time from at the city and political and social matters from the angle of time. And these 3 days, almost all conversations made me remind this idea of the play and game as a limited place and time in which you make conventions together that can be very fixed, or they can be changed. And I would say it's actually a great way to speak about politics, or how people do politics, and animals also do politics. I would say animals do politics as well, very much. We are animals, anyhow. Let's see. I've got to. I'm so used to Mac. That's one of the play fields. Yeah. Yeah.
We're just trying to catch you all out in the digital age.
Exactly. This is just the Swiss issue. That's the issue that we revisited in this other one. Just an example.
Okay.
And then I wanted to say that actually this piling up of titles, often our books are inspired by piling up titles or books that rub against each other, and that has been How to Live Together, a book by Roland Barthes. It's speaking about living together through literature, and a very popular Penguin Pocket about how to be free, and they stand together. But the new couple of books that informed us for the Swiss issue, the new Swiss issue, has been Expulsion and How to Live Together. Expulsion is Saskia Sassen's book that talks about our age as an age where more than ever people are chased away from their land and from their living. So they stand here balancing like boxers after a fight. They fed our questions around anarchism and organization. Last year, visiting cooperative buildings in Switzerland for the new issue, How to Live Together, got another counterpart, aware of our privileged existence and Switzerland as a symbol of privilege, aware of the horrors of the time and a grim opposition of Roland Barthes. Saskia Sassen's Expulsion was there. Both are reminders of what is at stake, because at the other hand, it's this desire to make new communities and define other ways of living together. But now it happens in the context of mass expulsion. I'll quote a short description of this expulsion. Soaring income inequality and unemployment, expanding populations of the displaced and the imprisoned, accelerating destruction of land and water bodies, today's socioeconomic and environmental dislocations cannot be fully understood in the usual terms of poverty and injustice, according to Sasse. They're more accurately understood as a type of expulsion from professional livelihood, from living space, even from the very biosphere that makes life possible. And here again, I would say ambivalence of success, together with the image of the Matterhorn, the most used icon of Switzerland, and Switzerland as a sign of success almost. At the same time, on the back it's 100 years ago. So you see the ultimate ambivalence of success is the loss of our ecosystems.
Of the glaciers.
You see the glacier. Okay, the next title from this pile of titles, from Art, Writing, Constructing the City. I didn't really understand this title, so I put against it our own title.
Does.
So I put against it our own title, which is Publishing as Resistance, which was a small presentation we did 2 years ago. And it's more about the imagery of resistance, or of what this is. So it starts with this image of Farel. Farel was one of the reformists in the French part of the Jura. One of the first cities to reform was Neuchâtel, and here's this Farel, and he holds up his Bible, his book, towards the church, frontally. We were there for our research on anarchism and the anarchist watchmakers and their publishing practices. This is, so Farel, and this moment is in 1530, but the sculpture is from the 19th century. The statue, it's of course a long story to dedicate a monument to a destroyer of images, which represents him precisely in that position of a hero. So here's exactly the same frontality and the same movement. It's an iconography, I would say, of a. And here's the opponents, and they made a fence between them, and they're just as frontal. And people like this, they form a wall. I want to add a little quote to this. Virno talks about the exit and the engaged withdrawal. It's a bit a controversial idea, because in times of where the biggest enemy is ecological catastrophe, it's the question where exodus would be. But the theory of exodus proposes that the most effective way of opposing is not through direct confrontation, but by means of what Paulo Virno has called engaged withdrawal, mass defection by those wishing to create new forms of community. One need only glance at the historical record to confirm that most successful forms of popular resistance have taken precisely this form. They have not involved challenging power head-on. This usually leads to being slaughtered, or if not, turning into some often even uglier variant of the very thing one first challenged, but from one or another strategy of slipping away from its grasp, from flight, desertion, the founding of new communities. So again, he's on a pedestal, he's pointing, it's frontal, the accusation, but this time it's the thing that's, it's not a church, it's the media actually. And behind the camera is, of course, the people that he wants him to follow him. Look here, at the same time, through and behind the media. You, says Trump, I am your voice. Me? Not me. Do you see the woman holding a book in front of her face? This other remarkable event took place in the realm of books and hands and crowds and resistance. Suddenly there was a woman who started reading in the middle of a Trump election rally. The book is turned the other way. She's reading a book. She's not showing it, but we can see the cover. She's reading Claudia Rankin's 2014 book, Citizen, a most complex mix of poetry, prose, artworks, and criticism. The first chapter of the book consists of stories Claudia Rankin wrote based on microaggressions, personal experiences she and people she knows have had with racism. So she's channeling other people's voices and her own voice in this. It's many voices. On the cover is an artwork by David Hammonds. So I want to share with you what happened just before she starts to read the book.
What's going to happen is Mexico is going to pay for the wall. I will tell you right now. They're going to pay for it.
Softer?
No,
A bit?
it's okay.
Because they've been doing it number one. Their leaders are much smarter than our leaders. Our leaders don't have a clue. They do not have a clue. And they're really far more coming.
Yes. No, not yet. No.
Get out of here.
And then in... Wait, let's see, wait.
It's the volgende, yeah.
Yeah, but I messed up the order in the...
Oh, okay.
So here, oh wait, sorry, yeah.
And then
Excuse me, have patience with me. Here is the scene where you see her take up the book, but also notice in the background what happens.
You stabbed somebody, and the newspapers say you didn't do it. And you say, yes, I did it. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. I stabbed him and it hit the belt. And they said you didn't do it. If they said I didn't do it, I'd be so happy. This is the only election in history where you're better off if you stab somebody. What are we coming to? And other things. And other things. A lot of crazy things are happening out there. But Hillary said, I don't like Donald Trump's tone. You like my tone? You know, I built a great company.
Look.
And I actually have a great temperament. For success, I have a great temperament, I will tell you. And I don't like being ripped off like we're being ripped off. I wouldn't sleep, you know, I'm not a big sleeper. Like 3 hours, 4 hours, I toss and turn, I think I need to be. I want to find out what's going on. And you know, I'm the only one. I'm self-funding my campaign. I'm putting up my own money, right?
yeah, it's good.
$50 and $17 and $28 and even a few $100. But I'm funding because how do you send back? A woman sends a check for $17, send it back. You can't. And also, that's really an investment in the country. It's an investment in a campaign. There's no influence peddling. I can't be bought for $17. But we have amazing people. And that doesn't amount to, relatively speaking, doesn't amount. But I'm the only one that's self-funding my campaign. I'll put up a lot of money. In fact, we just started with radio ads. Did anybody hear the ads yet? They're good. You know. I think, why should we go fancy? Let me just talk. We got a mic. I talk. We will do this.
Okay. Well, and this video went viral. And people wanted to know who she was, the reading lady. And then she was on MSNBC. She's called Johari. And I want to show a little piece of her reaction to this. First, she's also saying that she started to read after the bullying. She says, he was bullying people. And here she is.
Did you mean how Claudia Rankin's book goes specifically? Is that part of what you sort of put together there in Conscious Life?
It was the book. I saw Claudia Rankin about 2 weeks ago in Chicago at an event. I think it was at the museum, Contemporary Art Museum, and it was called Citizens, and it was her reading her poetry and other artists talking about what it means to be citizen in America and how that experience differs for each person. And that was powerful. That's how I got the book. I had read her poetry online and saw her videos on YouTube, but someone had an extra copy, and I wanted a signature, and I got the book from there. And I was reading it. We got there 2 hours before the event started, and I decided that I want some books to read, to pass the time. I just want to stay in my seat. And that was one of the books that I brought, and I was actually reading it before the cameras, before the event started. So it was actually something that I brought to pass the time before Donald came on.
And when you had that in...
And now it's out of sync, but it's nice when you look at the whole interview, they are out of sync. And the interviewer gets very uncomfortable with it. But Johari is not getting uncomfortable with it. And she is asked to make a story out of this that is heroic, and she keeps refusing it in this wonderful, elegant way. She keeps refusing to make it a heroic story with other intentions. So she keeps it in this beautiful, ambivalent, ambiguous way. Going back to the books and the hands. It's not necessary. Let's stop here.
Well, that was absolutely wonderful. I'm just wondering, food for thought as we move on and deepen and broaden, get more detailed. I don't think we can get any more detailed already, actually. Ravi spoke about the slowing time. In terms of this, the digital, the non-stop flow of information, and Ravi spoke about the slowing time. To a court case, for example, putting it back into writing, into an old form. And I'm just wondering about that. Just food for thought that we can maybe come back to about publishing as resistance. Very much was that not what the woman was doing there behind Trump, just slowing time, getting it back to something, this idea of community, using the DIY form to slow things down for the community rather than this proliferation of the global to California and back. Maybe there's something in that too. But what was really delightful about, for me personally, and maybe for some others in here, about Ninka's talk there was how she invoked that anarchist tradition of making fun of the pompous, all our titles, which I thought was really great. So our wordiness, art, writing, constructing, all that stuff, writing, publishing, alternative media, absolutely, that was great, well done. In that very theme, we're moving to something which is a much simpler title now, by Mary Lafferty, artist from Edinburgh. Mary's title is just Tongues. Isn't that correct, Mary?
Letters, tongues and words.
Oh, letters, tongues and words. Well, all right, I've just got tongues right here. Letters, tongues and words. It's still much more simple than our stuff, which is great. You can't get any simpler than that. This is a work that Mary's she's been working on this, sponsored by the RSA with various other artists. What is really interesting, again, about this idea of the proliferation of the digital and what is happening is the treatment of the word as a thing. And it kind of takes me back to, just by way of introduction, The sort of things that Baudrillard, maybe very dated now in the 1980s and the 1990s, was saying about how European culture is turning back again to its roots as in terms of iconography, as a culture based on the image again, where before, you had certainly post-Renaissance, post-Reformation, post-industrialization, especially in the 19th century, with universal education, everyone learning to read and write. European culture became very literary based, very based on the word. But with maybe this proliferation of the word starts to be used as a thing, and as you can... The idea was that there was a revenge of the object on European society, and that we were turning back again to our roots as a society based on the image, that people understand things and relate to the image, and we move beyond, with this digital proliferation, we move beyond the lexical and the idea of the word used as a thing. So these are some themes that Mari is going to talk to us about, which in her project, Letters, Tongues, and Letters, Words, Tongues. Thank you, Mari. So Mari Lafferty.
I'm going to talk a bit about a project that I spoke about yesterday. So the Tongues project is it looks at themes of automatism, divination, language, and the hypnotic. It's a new experimental film that creates a secular version of the practice of speaking in tongues. And I want to show here, through this presentation, some selected work and my interest in language and words to try and map the origins of that project that I'm working on at the moment. I once heard a joke described as an interruption in a known pattern, and I've always thought of art similarly, that the jolt of the interruption is what I experience in the art that I connect with. I'm going to run through some artworks that use language directly or indirectly to create interrupted spaces, play tricks, and objectify the word and its meaning. Abracadabra, thinking about the word as an object. This artwork I create as I speak uses the word abracadabra, which is an incantation. It roughly translates in Hebrew as I create as I speak, which is the title of the work. It was believed to have powerful healing powers, and is written when it's written on an amulet and while it's being spoken at the same time. This silent 8mm black and white film shows my partner getting a tattoo. It's at once a performance and a gesture of protection, branding. It's reminiscent of magic tricks. The tattoo was intended as a half-cast spell. If not spoken, does it work? I'm just going to play this now. It was filmed in the back of a tattoo parlour with really strong light, and at the time I was working in the DCA projection booth with a man there, Ronnie, who'd been a projectionist all of his life, and when he first saw it he said it reminded him of an 8mm porno, which I've always kind of quite liked, although I've never seen any of those. The next work I'm going to talk about is drosti. Drosti, the word meaning an image inside of an image, was really what led the project. It's both the mechanism of making the film and the image that you see here, which is the film. The film of a match being struck over and over again was printed using match flame. Made on residency in London, I'll actually play this in the background while I'm talking. Hopefully that'll come on. Made on residency in London at Nowhere Lab with the support of a filmmaker and an absolute wizard, James Holcomb. Drosti is an experiment. I filmed the struck matches on black and white 16mm, then we reversed the optical printer to allow us to print the negative using the light of struck matches. What we created looked ghost-like, a hypnotic visualization of light and dark with the flares of white and the trailing flames, matches, fingers and hands appearing out of the dark. That any image had shown up was a complete surprise to us, But that was part of the project as well. The jeopardy of it potentially being destroyed, the jeopardy of it not working at all is all part of the project. It was that interest in flames and the idea of looking further into light that drew me to this. So light is still referred to as candle power if you buy a torch, which I always thought was really interesting. Fire is life-giving and dangerous and elemental. Looking into the history of flame and its life as a symbol, I came across these images. I was struck by a memory of leaving our west of Scotland home, where we went to a free church every Sunday, to go to Georgia in the USA to a Baptist tent revival. The scene was overwhelming. There was singing, shouting, writhing, sobbing, laughing. It was so loud and discordant. This level of self-expression felt dangerous to me. There was no pattern. It was excessive. There was no shared language. Words were out of context, being repeated over and over again. The room was filled with communication, but not anything that was safely translatable. Looking further into these sorts of phenomena of mass hysteria, I came across tarantism, partly through Viviana. It was a gift. And hysteria has its origins in the idea of the woman and that it's constantly on the move, that it's both a life-giving organ, but it's also often the cause of death in women who suffer from nervous hysteria, like fire. The world, its structures and patterns were not written for women, so the need to express themselves outside of it, to interrupt and challenge the pattern, were often realised through physical and therefore explainable phenomena. Tarantism or dancing mania is one example where it was supposedly the bite of a wolf spider that caused women to go into this trance and dancing mania and then to collapse. But there's never been any links made that that's actually what happens, and now it's a national dance. Automatism and primal scream therapy are examples of humans as we have started to tap into the subconscious and find ways of expressing ourselves outside of these codes and patterns that we've created, but which we now feel bound by. The surrealists would create trance-like states through which to make work, their technique and articulation treading the line between the mystic, which is external, and the subconscious, which is internal. New languages are best learned when you're an infant, and having watched my own son learn how to speak, it's been a fascinating experience. But the languages created through these sorts of practices, and tongues as an example of this, are not language. When put through a CAT scanner for an ABC News special, a man speaking in tongues was surprised to find out that it was not the language centre of the brain that lit up. He claimed to be able to translate the tongues of others, but this is a creative act, not a shared pattern. Tongues and the project that I've been working on, I'm right in the middle of at the moment, which I spoke a little bit about yesterday. For this, I created a workshop with voice specialists through which a group of participants, although I'm wondering about that word now, since you were talking about participation, I think, Ravi, at the start, step from conscious vocalization into subconscious embodied vocalization. As I said yesterday, each stage of the workshop was designed to concentrate on their work individually, in pairs and as a group, bringing them apart and back together again. Like Drosti, I had thought that this project would either work, i.e. tongues would be sung, or that it would not work and there would be awkward silence. The outcome was, like Drosti, much more complex. What I realised throughout this project was that the film had always been the kind of focus of the output, but actually it was bringing people together into a room. It was the planning of the workshop. It was the trying to make this happen through kind of pseudo-scientific means that was actually the art in itself. Though it didn't always sound like my experience of tongues, the atmosphere, the collective drive and exhaustion definitely felt the same. And whenever we were in the space together, the overall emotion, the kind of heightened sense of emotion is still something that I'm struggling to talk about without starting to laugh or cry. It was such a strange experience. So to end with, I'm going to play the same sound clip that I played yesterday, just to give us a chance to hear about that in relation to what I've spoken about. The end.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much. Isn't that great? Abracadabra, I create as I speak. I didn't know that in Hebrew. Wonderful. Yeah, okay, so we're moving on now to, thanks very much. We're moving on to Agnieszka Killian now. Agnieszka put on an exhibition in Berlin a couple of years ago called Law as Literature. Sorry? Dreams and Dramas, Law as Literature. I went to see that exhibition, really interesting because examining the notion of law as a fiction, law as a narrative, law as a sort of publishing, if you like, because of making public of stories. So the forum of the court and of the law as a means to make public certain stories about human lives and so forth. So also very interesting again in that relationship to what Ravi was saying about slowing time to shift to a court case. But the notion of it as a going public and of it being a type of literature and a narrative is what Agnieszka is going to speak about, I think. I'm looking forward to this. Thank you very much, Agnieszka.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for introduction, and thank you for invitation to Viviana, to Johnny, and thank you to everyone who made that happen, that we can meet after that terrible fire what stopped us to organize it a year ago. So just my talk is prepared like kind of as we were in discussion that time. I hope it will bring something to the subject we are going to discuss, publishing, writing, and the city all together. As you mentioned, I'm a curator with juridical background, so for a lot of people it means I'm a lawyer, just simple. So just let me only to extend a bit your wonderful presentation of Dreams and Dramas Law as Literature project, because this is also the background of my interest, my today interest, and my today talk I would like to present. I'm very interested in seeing the concept and ideas not separate, but in the light of each other. So, examining during the exhibit Dreams and Drama Law as Literature, what I had the pleasure to collaborate with Alicja Rogalska, who talked yesterday, I took or selected 4 concepts: body, land, community, and property. Yes, to analyze them together. As I believe, for instance, the citizenship cannot be discussed only as a state concept, but also as kind of inherited property. So, one of the legal rituals. And for today, I prepared for you something what is also some kind of legal ritual, discussed and constantly rewritten. So I'm going to talk or tell you few stories on nature, community, map, and property. And I have a question for you because more precisely, I will concentrate next on the way how all that characters I mentioned, nature, community, map, and property, are appropriated and constantly rewritten. By, as my question to you, not rhetorical, by whom? Who is the biggest, or one of the biggest, after Ravi, publisher in the world?
Google. Yeah, Google.
Ca-
Google.
Good.
He says,
Yeah, but
says
yeah.
Google.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. After the Google.
10 points.
Church. Okay. So you are very close. Courts.
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 Courts of law.
Courts of law. By making the decisions and making them public. What does it mean to make public?
Publish.
Is publish. Yes. We maybe will discuss further. So, all that concepts, now I start my story. A story has a matryoshka structure. Matryoshka, this is that little doll in doll in doll and so on. So, might be chaotic. So all the protagonists I mentioned today are structured in our structure world, meet at the one point called by the lawyers geographical indication. So to tell this story, I will firstly do the two introductions and then I provide two examples. So what kind of term is geographical indication? On what does geographical indication indicate? At the first case, the question, for instance, where Dresden is located, where does it is very fixed and simple. But as I will present you, is actually fluid and tell us much more on constant rewriting and the space fabrication as some pre-given concepts. So when we think about Scotland or Brandenburg, the thing might be much more complex as we believe. So let me illustrate geographical indication with specific coffee. Some of you maybe know it because I would like to recall Monsund Malabar. Yes.
Okay.
So after the coffee harvest, its seeds are exposed to the monsoon rain and winds for a period of about 3 to 4 months. It starts a very special process. The beans begin to swell and lose the originally acidity, resulting in a flavor profile. To reach this effect, it is needed kind of alliance of the community harvesting the beans, sharing the methods of exposure to the monsoon, but also the monsoon itself. Geographical indications, therefore, seems to be invented by the lawyers just to illustrate Bruno Latour's interwoven concept of nature and culture. The nature is not just a silent, passive counterpart, but a lively actor. Okay, this is maybe more human-like. So therefore, geographical indication story will be not solemnly about location or specific region only. It's more on assemblage, connecting countless actors, the wind, sometimes the specific soil, human bodies, but also the memory and capabilities, practices over generation shared knowledge. It is certainly some kind of coexistence of all those actors where there is no clear division between subject and object co-authorship of those actions. So maybe here it's also important, as we were talking about collectivity and individuality, what it might mean or how we can think about it also, drinking a monsoon balabar. Exactly this interaction or involvement between anthropomorphization of the thing and reification of the subject is the very thing that produces a specific map of experiences. Okay, I'm too fast. Sorry. This kind of map creates something I call for now a spatial space, something attached to the specific location, not being only this location. Here we come to the very first critical point to be discussed then by one of the biggest publishers of the world after Google. I have something, not so, okay. The order is not Matryoshka order, I'm sorry. So, the assemblage called later geographical indication overcome the several dichotomies, being tangible, intangible, and lastly being not fixed or transferable values, but something in between. And that was a whole catastrophe, being in between. Because this situation, as we will see, that exact beautiful moment of overcoming those dichotomies leads us to establishing rights on geography. That rights on the geography, the situation makes the geographical indication to be put or pressed into the dichotomies again. The dichotomies of being material and immaterial, because what the lawyers call it, it's immaterial good or immaterial rights or immaterial property. But property, where does it resist? Where is it located? Have anyone seen property as such? As Danish legal theoretician Alf Ross has aptly noted, nobody has seen property. Property and possession are two different constructs. You can possess something, not owning it. Possession is a factual state, an assertion of power over a thing. Property is something more. It's a ritual. One might say that property defines the line between subject and object and mean mutual appropriation of people and the things. And now, for only a second, I will sneak into the subject what Alicia discussed beautifully yesterday. This legal person as one of the oldest legal fictions determining the Western legal system. Not having a body, legal person, collection of things could receive one. And this is the clue, because we having a community harvesting Malabar coffee, we have a concept of that collectivity, what became the kind of oldest legal personhood, who personified, embodied that geography, and having and being co-owner of that assemblage of nature, set of circumstances. And we can ask here, are legal and physical persons equally real given to the law, given that the law gives them existence, or they are equally artificial and fictitious as the law gave them existence? So, now I skip that fragment, and having regard that the sub-story on property, the relation between legal and physical, we would ask, what are the politics of ownership? Yeah. What are the politics of ownerships and how the biggest publisher discussed that? Here we see Cologne, a city what we might think we know where it's located and how big it is. That map presents a city, but as you know, that city is famous for a beer, and Only for the purpose of producing that beer, Cologne is almost 10 times bigger as the city itself. It extended its geography, and it extended by the decision of the Supreme German Court. So that map rewrites topography of the city. For any other purposes, not beer producing, the Cologne had the administrative borders, but for beer producing has 10 times bigger. So geographical indication as immaterial good, therefore, is the concept that allows to circulate the idea and geography and make it viral. So here we feel under the skin the tension between layers, space as a physical location versus space as social construct, driven by property and a lot of other factors. But that example with the Cologne extension is nothing when we compare that with that other one. Rügenwalde. Where does it is? Okay, you don't know it, and first nobody knows that, and it was to be invented. This is a very small town, what apparently lays on the Baltic seashore, but it means I don't manage.
5 minutes.
Okay. But it's very open question, and it was open question also like in front of the court. Rügenwalde is famous because the farmers used to produce there some very specific sausage. Okay, so my story is very like bottom, like it seems not be political. Tea sausage made from 2 parts of pork. I will not go to the details. But 1927, it became legally protected as geographical indication of origin. For protecting it, it was delivered kind of explanation, justification, written by both the parties, geography, and finally the court who delivered the justification, why it is so important to name it as that assemblage of human and not human actors working together. It was pointed a specific animal food provided and specific wood for smoking that sausage. So everything indicated on a very specific place, understood not as a social contract but as a very fixed location, as a geography-driven factors. But during the World War II, borders shifted, and Rügenwald became Darłowo. So, does it mean Rügenwald disappeared? As we seen with the Cologne example, the rewriting geographical coordinates is not such a big problem. Geography can circulate. But what would be just to decide? What would be just to decide about the space and about all the factors like given us, all the actors, nature, community, map, some specific setting. Who is the new owner or co-owner of that specific situation? The new community in Old Rügenwald, renamed Darłowo, or maybe just everyone? Or the producer community who moved mostly to the West Germany. So the court making this decision had to deal with the questions like, what are forms of participating in property? How do we participate in property? Who absorbs whom? The geography absorbs community, community absorbs geography. And maybe it does not come as a surprise to you, but Rügenwalde became now Bad Zwischenhahn, West Germany. What was rewritten by German Supreme Court, Bundesgerichtshof. So it means the community of producers became just a circulating geography, and it was published.
Thanks very much. That's wonderful. There we go. Well done. Well, excellent timing. Okay, so here we are. Okay, everybody's spoken. We're in what we're calling the writing cage. Okay, and we're enclosed by Prabakar's beautiful sort of amphitheatrical wall, which he took from the Jungle Book and more homely sources, as he pointed out. So, and of course, we're all in this together, as it were. We're all animals in here together. So we'll all have a chance to ask some questions and so forth in a second. First of all, I'll just start things off by putting many of the questions symbolically, metaphorically here today. The tradition of the animal fable corresponds exactly to that Kittlerian, if you like, the Kittler, Friedrich Kittler, the German media guru, philosopher, genius, whatever you want to call him. Friedrich Kittler speaks about literature as he tries to do away with the fetishization of literature, and just sees literature as a media or a medium which belonged to a certain time. And why it was such a successful medium, if you look at things like, Homer, for example, is because it delivers, it absorbs a message, it delivers a message, it has a certain memory. Things like, how does it have memory? It's things like memory through rhyme, for example, allows us to memorize certain things, to transmit through the voice or through writing. Okay, so it's a fine medium for him. And of course, De La Fontaine's version of the fables are a great example of this, because you have this story of perhaps two animals, the fox and the rabbit or something like that, and then it always ends up with a rhymed couplet of a moral at the end, some political, social moral for us all to learn. So I'd like to kind of take off from that with my question, and refine things down that we've done in the panel into some simple moral message, if that is possible. Probably not. But I'd like to take one of the themes that I seem to hear coming out again and again and again. And it's not a new theme, it's not something that we're not all aware of. I'm talking about speed. There seemed to be something going on about speed of communication, speed of operation, speed of transmission, speed of understanding. Something to do with speed changing, coming into the digital age, for example. Something to do with a moral message about speed. As I say, this is nothing new. You can read about this in Deleuze and Guattari, for example, speak about this. But I'm just wondering, and I'm going to pose this question to everyone in the panel. The speed. Speed, good thing, bad thing. So we seem to see a change in speed. We seem to see some kind of dichotomy about speed. Are we being moral about speed? Are we saying it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, that things are speeding up or slowing down? So, for example, if we listen to Ninka's speech, very much we see Trump trying to, he does these incantations of his audience by speaking quickly and shouting and getting them all excited about stuff, getting this intensity of his message, whatever it may be. And of course, posing the book cover against that, so almost like a slowing down of it, if you like. I'm just suggesting, I'll come back to you a second, right? And then, of course, we've got Mari with the speed of the tarantella, the dance, the going crazy, with the speed of the speaking in tongues, of the crazy voices. What does it mean? At one point, Agnieszka said, spoke about going too fast, and we might also, if you like, juxtapose the publication of court judgments and of court proceedings, not a quick thing at all, against something like Google, which is changing. Even as we speak, Google is publishing new things by the second. I'm sure billions of new words have gone out today alone. Okay, so again, Robert, of course, with Ninka's stuff about the book cover, so slowing stuff down. And of course to you, Ravi, who originally spoke about speed and the intensity and the speeding up of things in the digital age. So, I want to come round you all. Speed, good thing, bad thing. Can we be moral about it? Is it a moral issue? Ravi, would you like to take it away first of all?
I've never thought of it.
Oh, sorry, let's get the mic on.
I think the way I come around it, I have never thought about objects morally. I'm interested in the way people inhabit them, and the way and the questions of the political are always inherent in certain formations, and it is important for us as thinkers, as artists, to engage with these potentials. I think that is the form I would look at, and the potential can be all kinds. There can be all kinds of potentials. There could be, right-wing populism is a potential. There are everyday affects that are potentials. So that is the way I look at it. In terms of speed, the way infrastructures change, there are multiple levels of temporality. That's what I'm always interested in. There's no hierarchy of temporality, and the way we navigate these different temporalities, and that's always interesting. Even in very violent events, people usually see the immediate moment. But for me, eventalization has different stretches of time. Sometimes a case may take 15, 20 years, but that is also the event. So you have to, I think for me, it becomes interesting to navigate these different levels of time and to develop concepts to navigate these different levels of time, rather than saying this is good, that is bad. And that's, I would not judge a hierarchy, but actually try and navigate it conceptually and materially. Yeah.
Okay, great. So it's a given, and we have to deal with it, basically. Let's swing round to the other side. Nienke.
Well, maybe...
Can you take a microphone, yeah? Thanks. Sorry.
Actually, I hadn't been thinking of time at all with this compilation, but more of space. Mm-hmm. But there is a polyrhythm or a polychronos maybe there, and maybe this inside of the book and the outside. Yeah. So the outside is it's like a reminder of, or a souvenir or a poster even. I had some other pictures lined up after this one to show other ways of having a reading material or a connection to another world in public. And I thought it was so interesting with this book that it's called Citizen, but in a way she's almost illustrating the idea of the multitude instead of the citizen, actually. The other photos were somebody, the archetype of somebody, a spy hiding behind a newspaper. Mm-hmm. And being able to look at the world from behind, but at the same time, so you can, this big thing you can use like that. You can separate yourself from the world, but still you would be yes.
This big thing here,
yes.
So you can
so
hide.
You can hide, but it will also still show a title to the rest of the world, like with a book. And then I had a last photo of the people in a metro, in public transport, all connected to Google probably with their cell phone. So I was questioning in what way we are in that space and in another space at the same time, and what it means, because the people that are looking at their cell phones, they're also weirdly distributed in space, as if they want to avoid each other's gaze. And they don't show anymore the title of their book, mm-hmm. So they don't give this entrance into the world that they are disappearing in. They have only the brand of their cell phone on the back. Sure. So it's a very different way of being in the space and not in the space, and separate and together. Okay. Yeah. So I would say that it's that space and time are.
Yeah. Great. Great. Are you going to speak, Mari? Yeah.
I think whenever you were talking about time, I think that's absolutely linked to space as well. One of the things I was interested in was the idea that I think we we think about the way that we save time through the technologies and the kind of software and things that we use now. So we almost kind of are, you know, whenever you're watching sports matches and they slow things down so quickly, or slow things down so they're so slow so you can see absolutely everything. And I can't help but think that maybe that's given us this inherent sense that we can control time in some sort of way. Yeah. But actually what's potentially really happening there is that we're starting to be controlled by you know, the things around us that we see as the tools with which we control time. Yeah. And I think that's similar in terms of space, because whenever you save time, if it takes you 20 minutes now to, you know, do something with a file when it used to take you an hour, what do you do with the rest of that time? That doesn't become a thing where you think, oh great, now I can go for a picnic. Right. It just gets rolled into the rest of your time. Yeah, that links up with something very neatly, something else you speak about, because of course that's something that Walter Benjamin speaks about in the, you know, the famous article, the Art and Age of the Mechanical Reproduction, where he speaks about he speaks particularly about slow motion and how that allows us to, the slow motion film, it allows us to change space, to engage with space, to dynamize space, and that we then discover things about our subconscious awareness of space. And the subconscious, of course, is very much a part of your presentation there. Yeah, and so I'm just wondering about, again, coming back to the thing I asked Ravi, so about the moral sense. So is there any, you know, are you going to be moral about the tarantella or about the speaking in tongues? Is there a moral aspect to that, or is there? No, I mean, no. I mean, I always think whenever it comes to thinking of something in a moral way, there needs to be an intention to do that in the first place. And I think that one of the things, you know, one of the luxuries of making art is that you have this opportunity to kind of stick your head into a different part of the world and a different thing that people do, and just to watch it and record it. And to kind of put yourself into it, but not in a way that you're trying to sum it up for other people. I mean, I think that we're constantly trying to moralize these things in terms of technology and the things that we use in space and time and what we do with those things, and it just seems so completely dangerous because it's also so ubiquitous that it's having the absolute opposite effect as to what it would. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? I do, and I'm thinking about what you're saying, what Ravi's saying, and I always remember that Freud thing, you know, where because the subconscious is everything, or the unconscious is everything, and you know, like he says, no means yes. Just saying no to something means you're admitting its existence, so you're actually saying yes to it. Very dangerous, obviously, but there is a danger there, is there not? To say one more thing, and it also kind of makes me think about yesterday whenever we were talking about archives and the body as an archive and using archives for artworks, and you know, we're talking here about, you're talking about map making, we're talking about publishing, we're all talking about, you know, there's a danger, I think, to understand those things as some sort of truth, because there's a huge amount of information, and you know, there's a materiality to it, there's a physicality to it. But even if we think of our bodies as an archive, what does that really mean? Because we grow. You know, my body is an archive, but I would remember this table as a 2-year-old is a very different thing than the way I would remember it as a 30-year-old. So how can we, you know, how do we think about archives as a way of kind of capturing time, but also in themselves as unreliable narrators of time? Yeah, great. Are you going to speak? Yeah, why not? Yeah. Keep it coming.
Okay. So talking about time and writing by the court, decision-making process in perspective of law, it's very interesting because courts are in fact timeless spaces, because court by the decision-making refers to something what was already referred in many books, in the legal books, in the previous decisions. So even you are facing like a hearing and it might be like a 5 or 10 minutes, actually the whole thing happens then after, when you have the time when the judge have to go back sometimes to the really very previous decisions, and in that fact, it is a very interesting relation between past and future, because this is working on the future in the past. In the fact, making a decisions, you have to refer to the past. You cannot do that otherwise. This is the whole tragedy of the law. So law is kind of an archive, embedded archive. It also have a lot of refers and in that sense. So and the second thing, of course, is the way with the medium, with what the courts are working with, books or maybe viral informations. So here we are going back to the question Ravi posed, evidence law and the fact findings, and the time and time-wise, this is also a very critical point, especially now, how the court have access to some information, if the information is viral very fast and digest very quickly, how it could be collected back and so on. Yes, so just.
So the law as a text looks to the past, but also goes into the future. It's very contemporary in that sense.
Yeah.
Right, and so it doesn't have a speed then, does it?
It has very own speed. It could speed, but on own terms. It could also like stop and being like to sometimes to solve some very modern question. You have to go back, a property question or something. You have to go back to 2 centuries back, and for that you do some very specific work. What has that different time meaning?
Yeah. Okay, well, how about, thanks very much, that was great, thanks a lot. How about we open this up now to the floor? Do we call it the floor? Do we call it the amphitheatre? Let's open it up to the amphitheatre and hope that there are, in these little pockets that Prabhakar mentioned, his mother kept some little surprises for them maybe. I don't know, is that a general Indian thing, or was it just your mother, Prabhakar? Yeah. Great. Fantastic. Yeah. Let's see if there's any surprises in some little pockets around here. So, anybody got a question they want to put to the panel? Anybody specific in the panel or the panel in general? Yeah. Yeah, there's one over there.
Thank you. My question is for Ravi. You were talking like you focus mainly on the street crowd and I guess mob modality through that, and how, well, if you take into consideration the distribution of blame that goes along with it, and like, the moral responsibility and how generally protection of becoming anonymous basically in that space, and how this transfers to basically to the media, where you're even more so probably sitting at home behind the screen, so you get another filter of protection, and how this will affect your thinking process and sort of in a way how the ease of participation on itself in those crowds makes them grow exponentially, and kind of causes the normalization of various often extreme worldviews, and that increase on bandwidth kind of seems to be never ending at that point. And the question being like, how do we react to that kind of platform where that feeds on controversy and conflict, because once you face it, it kind of blows back, it just grows bigger. And how do you approach such, I don't know, cybernetical mob to discharge it?
It's a question I think we are all trying to deal with. I think this is what I foregrounded as a question for the political. I think in the last 5 years, all these main idols of the 20th century, the collective, take participation, is a key site of politics. It was seen as a necessary good. Now I'm not so sure. We are constantly exhorted to participate every second. Join this, join that, download this app. So the idea of participation has changed. and you know, it was linked to the contingency of political speech at one time. Now it's linked to you know, these new app-based participation, right? And so we have to open up all these questions, and I think these are key questions for the political. And you know, it's not that we throw away the collective; we have to revisit it. In a new context. And here I think we have to look for, you know, I always think of, you know, what are the sources of autonomy, critical distance, while being embedded in this world. We can't run away, embedded in this world. And I think the question of speech is absolutely critical. Because at one time, cities, you know, if you remember the old slogan, cities were spaces where you know, political speech was contingent political speech was possible, because cities are spaces where strangers meet, and new forms of speech emerge. Now I'm not so sure what is the idea of the stranger as the key site of critical thought. I'm not so sure. New communities have emerged, which are highly structured by media corporations. So we have to revisit all these questions.
Could I ask you something about that, Ravi? It makes me think, because that's a wonderful answer. It's a wonderful question. It's a really vital question. I'm thinking, I don't think this is the first time that there's been questions about participation and about the collective. I mean, obviously the not in the same general to the same extent, but the existentialists, for example. Not Sartre, but de Beauvoir, for example. Any act. You couldn't do anything because any act makes you immediately guilty. So there's always been that kind of questioning of, but we've reached a new peak. Is that what we're saying? We've reached a new peak. The other thing of the existentialists, obviously, you look at Kierkegaard and the suspension of the ethical. So is that what you mean? We have a suspension of the ethical now. We can't be sure about ethics. Thank you. Yeah, sorry. We'll just carry on. Suspension of the ethical. Is that what we're looking at?
I don't know, because I think if you take all the different codas representation, it's been questioned. It's always been questioned. Ideas of political participation has been questioned. I think we're in a new zone now. So I'm not rushing to give a certain take, because I don't know. I think all of us are in this together. We have to engage with this world. And I completely agree with you, Mari. Archive is a living archive. Nothing is stable. And this is exactly what Kittler said. Kittler said with storage, you can hear into the past and see the future. Take a phone call. You hear, but you cannot see. You speak, but you cannot see. So there are all kinds of temporalities that are opened up. So I think we have to be aware of, all kinds of, movements that are going on. Human, non-human, infrastructural.
I think it's interesting what you said about the disconnection and the connection. And I think that's also in what I showed, that there's the temporary disconnection. Simon Scheik wrote an interesting article about circulation and withdrawal, about magazines and publishing and the part that is not in public. So again, maybe back to the pockets of hiding something, and the books that have a cover or not, or the slow knowledge that's maybe sometimes smuggled even through times where there's not a place for this knowledge. And even maybe then making a link to a biologist that once told us that for diversification you need relative isolation. If there's no relative isolation, the diversity disappears. Yeah. So maybe in this idea of publishing is embedded the idea of also withdrawal, also retreat.
Yeah. Listen, on that note of the collective and engaging with the collective and with the publishing as both a private and a public thing, It is with great regret. I don't think we actually have time for any other questions, but of course these people will be here all day and we will all be engaging and having a collective experience all day, so do by all means engage and let's carry on this conversation. But for the moment we'll have to move on, so I want to say two things, and I'm really sorry we have to move on, but it's been great listening to this and we've taken our time. We haven't sped through it, which has been great. So two things. First of all is that this afternoon there is a part of the event which is called the Bar Camp, which is where anyone who wants can put their name down, can sign up to give a talk, to give a demonstration, to show something, to do something, to contribute, as it were, like a speaker or whatever, performer. And a few people are already doing things, and it looks really exciting. There's some films being showing. There's some engaging events happening. So if you want to put your name down for that, that would be really great. That takes place this afternoon next door in the Students' Union. Really looking forward to that. But for the moment, we're going to change to another type of collective. So we really are examining this relationship between the individual and the collective today, because we have a Mexican artist, Daniel Godinez Nivon. I'm sure I pronounced that wrongly, but have I pronounced that wrongly, Daniel? I've done okay, good. So, of course, if Trump were our president, he wouldn't be here, but Trump, fortunately, is not our president. We have not built a wall to keep Daniel out. Oh, no, we have built a wall. Bloody hell. Sorry, Daniel. I did like, I'm only going to quote this word from our friends from Netherlands when I say I did like that former Mexican president in his video on YouTube. I'm sure you all saw it. There ain't going to be no fucking wall. Anyway, but there is, because we have one and Prabhakar built it. So, Daniel is very interested in the communal works of the indigenous peoples of Mexico, Central America, obviously. He's going to do a workshop with us all, where somehow, through our individual geniuses, collectively combined, we are going to produce a piece of music. I am the most unmusical person on the face of this planet, so this is going to be some miracle, but I can't wait to see it. It's the Mexican Miracle Maker. And anyway, so we're going to have a workshop. We're going to produce some music, and we have some musicians called Musicians in Exile. They're people who have come from some other places. I think are currently residing in Edinburgh. And I'm not sure if they're refugees or asylum seekers, and I don't want to say what they are, but it's something like that. I think, anyway, they come from far-flung places to live in Edinburgh. They are going to perform the music that, by some miracle, all of you and me somehow make through this workshop. Now, I think Daniel's going to maybe reorganize our seats and stuff like that. So, yes, and take the mic and tell us what to do, Daniel, please. So, Daniel Godinez Nivon. Oh, and I should say before I mention, and thanks to everyone on this panel, to Ravi, Robert, Agnieszka, Mari, and Nienke. Thank you so much. It was wonderful. Yeah, and you will be able to visit the exhibition at the back all day too.
Hi. Okay. Yes. Well, before you leave, we are just beginning. Please. We have a really short time, so we will try to use it the most concrete way. Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Johnny, Viviana, Sabrina, and all the team to be here. I'm very happy. Well, my name is Daniel. I come from Mexico City, and today I have something to share with you, which is the notion of tequio, which is a communal practice implemented really antique by indigenous groups in Mexico. So I've been working for the past 10 years with these groups through this methodology that I use as an art form. Yeah. So, tequio is specifically a specific work that you do mandatory, is unpaid, and you do it because it can provide benefits to a specific group. Today, many of you may know each other, many others don't, so that's going to be really interesting for today. It uses assembly as a way to agglutinate and to compose the future work to create. So it's important to assume that we are not just going to discuss things, which is really important, but eventually it's mandatory that can provide a future action. It needs to provide an action. So yes, just this exercise is called specifically tekiorola, which can be translated roughly as tekiosong. At the final outcome will be a sound musical piece that will perform our friends Ali and Said. Okay, yeah. There he is. Some from musicians from exile. So I also would like to thank them for being here. Well, in order to begin, I would like to ask you if we can, with careful, because we have some cables and the equipment, we can create some sort of circle that we can see each other's faces. Just thank you very much. And if there are some empty seats, maybe we can take them to another place. Thank you very much. Sorry, Johnny. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Okay. Maybe we could turn this. Sorry. Down. Okay. Thank you very much. So the time is quite brief. I will stay here because. Okay. Well. Basically, this exercise will be divided in two parts. The first one is the assembly, which we can continue some of the previous discussion, for instance, or maybe we can create another specific subject that you consider pertinent, relevant. I will be making some sort of drawing of the dialogue to create a diagram, graphic forms, based in everything that happens here. Each participant, consensus, if we come to that, silence, lost argument, tensions, will have a graphic form that working with Ali and Said will also have a sound outcome. Also, as the conclusion of the assembly, we need to come across with them to decide the problem. Please take your seat. Careful with the cables and all. With the instruments also. Okay. Well, so before we start, I'm going to be the one that writes and draws the dialogue. And it's important for the musicians and for the Tekio song to decide, all of us, a specific phrase, an evocation that can bring some sort of poetic mood to the musicians in order to try to listen the previous dialogue that we will have. Okay? Any questions? Maybe there are many questions, but we will start. We have a really short amount of time. I think that for this first part, we will try to make for the 10-minute conversation to decide this specific phrase, and then another 10 minutes for the musicians to play. Right? Well, I mean, this is the final assembly of this event. There are many really interesting reflections and things that were discussed, many different backgrounds and lines of research, investigation. So it's a really unique space. So we have to, I mean, it's really rich to be here and maybe pick each other's brains for a moment. I mean, it's the final assembly, some sort of conclusion maybe. I don't know if Political Animal may continue next year. Maybe not. But the idea is to try to decide some way to close based in the things that were previously discussed. For me, it was really interesting yesterday, this notion that was discussed about those words in different languages that cannot have a specific translation. No? Thinking about rewriting and thinking about publishing, I would like to put it over the table, but maybe it's not something that you might like to discuss. Well, please, I hold the mic. Please, if someone else would like to maybe suggest. Can I give it again? It was an instruction, yes. Should I? Okay, we will briefly discuss, try to come across a phrase, a poetical phrase that our guests, collaborators for this workshop, Ali and Said, will use as a poetical evocation to perform, based in the things that were previously discussed in this morning and yesterday. Thinking about about rewriting, thinking about new words. Maybe we can.
What about something? I've got some things that people said this morning that I wrote down.
Please.
Gripped by the energy of the crowd. Gripped by the energy of the crowd. Not my words. Yeah. And what do I do now? Do I just keep saying it? Gripped by the energy. Where was it again? Gripped by the energy of the crowd. Gripped by the energy of the crowd. Ravi said it, you'll have to ask him.
For me, what is one word that comes out, would be hiding.
Hiding.
I suppose we need those concepts too. Yeah, this is very interesting.
Okay.
What do you hide? How do we hide?
Great.
To think.
Yeah.
Create.
Okay. Pockets.
When you cannot easily hide.
No. But he described those little hiding places as pockets. Prabhakar, where is Prabhakar? Oh, there he's there. Yeah. Yeah. Why have I got the microphone now? What do I do now, Daniel?
The idea of hiding is really interesting in order to think about sound as well. And if we are going to create a sound piece based in that notion, at least in the beginning, it's really interesting. For me, it reminds me, I've been thinking about this thing of rewriting and also working with these people in Oaxaca, some of the groups that I've been working with. They have this, some sort of law, communal law, that involves audiovisual productions, that it's based about the idea of be forgotten, the importance of being forgotten. And when someone, periodically, some documents need to be destroyed. And it's hiding in a way, but it's really just to be not even rewritten, just to destroy. Sorry? Remove specifically. Yeah. So maybe something that can. Does anyone would like to about this idea? Yes, please.
Something I wanted to say this morning was about ambivalence as well, so maybe that connects a little bit, because I think that was the most striking thing from what you were saying, like this idea of like hiding behind the book and hiding what you were, what you really think as a political resistance. So like the book becomes an object again because it's this physical barrier, but as a sort of in the act of resistance. But also this ambivalence for me was really like so striking in terms of what everyone was saying about, what does it mean to make something public? It's not about voicing an opinion, it's actually about kind of muddying the waters somehow, or finding a way to speak differently or have a discussion differently. So maybe hiding, I think, is nice, but...
Thank you.
I think over the last couple of days, the thing that's come across to me is this kind of reassertion of the unreliability of the archive. We talked yesterday about the body as an archive and how that can't always be taken as something solid. And today, I think we talked about the unreliability of narration as well. So think about shifting times and shifting experiences. I'm not certain of anything just now that I'm experiencing because things are moving so fast. And it feels like we need to have something that we can anchor ourselves to so that we can start to interpret where we're at now. Because this notion of shifting spaces and times just feels unrelenting at the moment. The unreliable archive.
Well, also working with, I speak, always based in my experience, but also working with these groups, the Mayan group, the Tojolabales. They do something really interesting that is, once a year, they rename everything that exists. Once a year. And there is one person, which is some sort of living archive, that is the one that needs to remember those. So it's generation after generation of this person that are the ones that make some sort of assembly like this, or they are the ones that remind specific, well then they die and there's no, but it's also about this idea of maybe of kind of hiding, kind of being more or less in the shadows. Something, okay? Thank you.
What you just said and the hiding together make me think of this strategy that people had when they're occupied by a foreign force, that they remove all the nameplates from the streets. So you don't rename, you just take off all the names.
Yeah, I guess.
Or there's also a strategy to produce a fake map or to remove some territories from map, like we have that zones used to have in Soviet Union. There was the places without any official produced map also. It was forbidden to make any image of it.
Yeah. On the current, as you said, like renaming the cities or the names, especially on the streets. Like recently, like as you may know, like in India, there have been like a lot of cities that have been like renamed after like ages. And I guess that is something that to be like consider and see that how things are changing like so fast in India especially. and the name of the street, name of the cities, and also the name of the the buildings, the architecture buildings, which has like big heritage history in India. That should be considered.
Well, it's, thank you. Really interesting, really interesting. But wait, let's think about a way to translate this into sound, because we are now approaching to the moment of how to make this a sound piece, right? So, this idea of could be interesting. I don't know what you may think. In order we can provide this specific phrase, poetical one, to create a sound piece. Well, that's a good question. Well, it eventually will be a sound, but think about a phrase, something that we can provide musicians. Maybe this idea of hiding, maybe a map, maybe with your instrument, create a map that will be forgotten as soon as it stops playing. I don't know. Or maybe like a getaway, try to create some sort of road or some sort of, I don't know, you know, you could maybe try to hide through music, try to hide using sound.
Yes. In Australia, I read in this Bruce Chatwin book that they make a map by singing. So you can only get the next part of your travel if somebody sings that part of the route for you.
This might be, but just kind of related to sound and hiding that, and okay, the sound and hiding, and how can you like map through sound, and how can you? It's really interesting. I saw this piece a while ago, and somehow I feel it's related. That during the Second World War, to make everybody very efficient, the Italian army armed blind people with certain forms of sonars that they would put on their ears, and they would create these Gillette drawings of how the airplanes went around the cities, and how can you actually map through sound. But these drawings were not really functional, because you would look at them, they would be just these really functionless things, but they're really aesthetically beautiful. But then again, I think if we think about sound and hiding, that could be something, that how the airplanes went around above the city, and how they kind of draw that up in certain rhythm.
Thank you. Well, so let's decide. Just an specific, just an exercise, just this workshop. The idea of how to hide, again, through music. Maybe all of us, maybe each one of us have a specific way to perceive us in space. Also in Glasgow, I've been here for 2 weeks. Maybe some of us only less, maybe less. Yes. So maybe a way to get lost or found through music. No? Okay. So let's decide. If there, it will be. Using sound in order to be silent.
It's very nice.
It was. Okay. Well, maybe do you have maybe Ali an idea that you would like to share? Something about.
Thank you. So maybe just make a musical roadmap. What do you think? Yeah? Musical roadmap? Does anybody like that phrase? Yeah?
It's okay? Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you. Well, now we are going to start the second part, which begin. I want you to please for a moment, just close your eyes. Please. And try to follow the sound of my voice. we will be now paying our attention, trying to listen. Let's try to perceive what might be the loudest sound right now. And the lowest sound. Let's open our eyes. Let's look at the instruments. What sound they might create to this map. Please, Ali and Said, thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. That was beautiful. And thank you, Danielle, for this moment. It was really special. I want to thank everybody who could actually make it today and come and stay with us for the first part of the second day of Political Animal. We are now breaking for lunch, but we will be very happy to see you at 2 p.m. in the Assembly Hall, which is just next building on your right-hand side when you go out from this building. The concept of the bar camp is that any of you can become the active participant of Political Animal. So during this afternoon, you would be invited, if you want, to deliver your own workshop or talk, or to present an idea, or just to try to create something with someone else. Is quite impromptu, is something that you are invited to do on the spot. If you do have an idea and you would like to do that, please come talk to me, or just use the paper that is outside the door on the registration desk, put your name down, and just try to list what is that you would need. Objects, devices, things that we will try to provide. There is not a long time between now and the next part, but we will see what we can do. If instead you're already busy, or you don't have an idea but you still want to come and just join us, we would be very happy to have you also for the rest of the afternoon. So after the bank camp, there will be a launch of Johnny's and Mitch Miller magazine, The Truth. And then after that, there is an open buffet for everybody, so that we would celebrate the end of the event. And then we are going to dance, if you're happy for it, if you really want to. I don't know if I will be able to do so, but I'll try my best. Yeah, maybe. So in case this is then our last chance, like our last moment together, thanks a lot. Thank you for everybody that followed these events on live streaming. Thanks to Kenny for all the patience with the sounds. And David for the live streaming. So I'm just saying this because the event is not finished, but we are leaving this room and we will not return here. This is also your last chance to actually have a look at Fucking Good Art, Nienke and Robert installation next door. So if you want to do it before leaving the galleries, that would be much appreciated. And therefore, thanks a lot, and maybe see you at 2 p.m. Thanks a lot. Awesome.
As we are here at the last moment, so I just wanted to say very thank you to Johnny and Viviana to organize this event, and also all the team from CCA, Sabrina and Eva, and the Glasgow School of Art, because I cannot forget this moment, because it was very special for me to be engaged in this process since last 2 years, and be a part of the book, and be a part of this exhibition and also this event. This is my first time to design something for this kind of event. So I was very, very happy, and I'm very, very thankful to everyone. Thank you so much.
Yeah, see you at 2.